What if the most dangerous thing about a cruise was not the ocean, but the cruise itself? Throughout history, these floating palaces of luxury have gone wrong in the strangest, dumbest, and most jaw-dropping ways imaginable. One ship flipped over and sank while still tied to the dock. One captain dropped dead before his disaster even started. One entire crew vanished while their breakfast sat warm on the stove. One ship was taken down by a leaking chocolate fountain. Sounds impossible, right? But every single one of these actually happened. And they are just the beginning. We are counting down 111 of the weirdest, dumbest, and most jaw-dropping cruise ship disasters in maritime history. So grab a life jacket and hit that subscribe button because it is completely free and way safer than any of these boats. Let us dive in. 1. Here is the dumbest way to die on a ship. Never leave the dock. After the Titanic, everyone screamed for more lifeboats, so the SS Eastland loaded up its top deck with heavy boats like a nervous squirrel hoarding nuts. Nobody asked the obvious question, where does all that weight go? In 1915, hundreds of giddy workers boarded for a company picnic in Chicago. Then the ship calmly tipped over into the river while still tied up. 844 people drowned in 20 feet of water. The lifeboats meant to save them helped sink them instead. 2. The captain died before the disaster could even get started. Talk about quitting early. Hours before the Morro Castle burst into flames off New Jersey. In 1934, the captain dropped dead at dinner from a heart attack. Suddenly, nobody on board knew how to do his job. Then a fire erupted and panic took over completely. Crew members allegedly hopped into lifeboats, first leaving passengers to fend for themselves in their pajamas. Here is the cherry on top. The flaming wreck drifted ashore and parked itself beside a Jersey boardwalk, where curious tourists came to gawk at it. 3. The Arctic spat out a ghost ship and let it wander for 38 years. In 1931, the SS Bay Chimo got trapped in thick ice off Alaska, so the crew wisely abandoned it and waited in a nearby town. Then the ship pulled the ultimate prank. It broke free from the ice and floated away completely empty. For decades, sailors kept spotting this crewless liner drifting around the frozen north like a confused tourist who lost the tour group. People boarded it, tried to salvage it, and it kept escaping. The last sighting was 1969. Nobody ever caught the runaway. 4. Picture paying for luxury and getting a floating porta-potty instead. In 2013, an engine fire knocked out all power on the Carnival Triumph in the Gulf of Mexico. No electricity meant no working toilets for thousands of passengers. The internet lovingly named it the Poop Cruise, and honestly, it earned the title. Sewage reportedly ran down the walls and dripped from ceilings. Desperate passengers pitched makeshift tents on the open deck to escape the smell. Food ran low, so people apparently fought over raw onions. They boarded dreaming of cocktails and left as survivors of a slow-motion bathroom apocalypse. 5. Imagine a wall of ocean knocking on your 10th floor window. In 2005, a freak 70-foot rogue wave came out of nowhere and smashed into the Norwegian Dawn off the coast of Georgia. This was not a splash. This monster wave shattered glass across 10 different decks like a giant flicking marbles. Forward luxury cabins filled with deep ocean water in seconds, trapping sleeping passengers in their rooms. People woke up swimming in their own suites, which is not the amenity they paid for. The ship limped to port soaked and humbled by a single wave that should not exist. 6. Here is a cruise so bad the passengers literally revolted. In 1978, a budget line sold dirt-cheap tickets on the aging SS America, promising a fun getaway. What they delivered was a rusty floating nightmare. Rats reportedly took over the buffet like they owned the place. Toilets allegedly exploded, and the whole ship smelled like regret. Passengers got so furious they actually staged a mutiny, which is a sentence you rarely hear about vacationers. They demanded the ship turn around and head straight back to port. Nothing says relaxing holiday like organizing a rebellion against your own cruise line. 7. Lake Michigan decided to gift wrap an entire ship in ice. In 1929, a brutal autumn storm slammed into the SS Milwaukee, and the temperature nosedived so fast it was almost rude. Freezing spray coated every surface and kept building layer after layer. The whole vessel slowly turned into a giant floating ice cube as the storm raged on. All that frozen weight piled up until the ship simply could not stay afloat anymore. It sank straight to the bottom, dragged down by its own icy shell. Mother Nature basically turned a steamship into a popsicle and called it a day. 8. This is the worst maritime disaster in American history, and almost nobody talks about it. In 1865, the steamboat Sultana was built to carry around 376 people. The captain, chasing easy money, crammed over 2,100 exhausted Union soldiers aboard, heading home after the Civil War. The overloaded boat groaned up the Mississippi until a patched-up boiler had enough. It exploded near Memphis with a deafening blast. The blast and fire killed roughly 1,800 people in the dark water. They survived a brutal war only to be doomed by one man's greed. 9. A captain wrecked an entire ship just to brag about being fast. In 1910, the Princess May was racing through thick Alaskan fog at full speed trying to break a travel record. Visibility was basically zero, but the captain apparently trusted vibes over caution. The ship rocketed straight onto a rocky reef and slid completely out of the water. At low tide, the whole hull sat perched high in the air, with its nose pointed at the sky like a beached show-off. The resulting photo became wildly famous. Everyone survived, which only made the embarrassment last that much longer. 10. A river basically stabbed a ship through the floor. In 1875, the city of St. Louis was cruising down the Mississippi when it met a hidden underwater snag, which is a fancy word for a giant sunken dead tree. The boat ran right onto it, and the trunk punched up through the bottom like a toothpick through a sandwich. It speared straight up through 3 entire decks. The bizarre finale was the grand piano getting pinned to the ceiling by the rogue tree. Passengers watched a tree trunk redecorate their fancy riverboat from the inside out in a matter of seconds. 11. Clear skies, calm water, and yet this cruise liner still managed to body slam a lighthouse. The weather off Delaware gave the crew zero excuses that day. The real culprit was the bridge team huddled together, wrestling with a broken espresso machine. While these trained sailors moonlighted as baristas, the ship drifted toward a fully lit lighthouse nobody could possibly miss. Then it just plowed right into it. Picture telling investigators your disaster happened because the coffee maker died. The lighthouse did not budge an inch. The ship learned the hard way that a caffeine fix can cost you a hull. 12. 3 minutes was all it took for the ocean to freeze a swimming pool solid. A passenger ship off New England wandered straight into a rare weather beast called a white squall. This thing skipped the rain and went straight for brutal instant cold. The outdoor pool's flash froze into thick blocks of ice while horrified passengers just stared. 1 second it was a relaxing swim, and the next it was a surprise skating rink. Nobody even got the chance to grab a towel. The squall disappeared as quickly as it struck, leaving frozen pools and a deck full of baffled tourists. 13. Running out of toilet paper mid-outbreak forced a cruise to gamble with casino receipts. A nasty norovirus tore through a Caribbean ship in the 90s like a runaway train. Passengers got sick at a pace the bathrooms simply could not survive. Then came the moment of pure horror when the ship exhausted its entire toilet paper supply. Crew members reportedly started handing out shredded slot machine receipts as an emergency substitute. Nothing screams jackpot like wiping away your gambling losses in the most literal sense. On that cruise, the house won, and so did the plumbing nightmare nobody planned for. 14. 27 years after the wreck, a lost lifeboat turned up hiding in a cave. The SS Valencia sank tragically off Vancouver back in 1906 in a genuinely brutal disaster. Most of the ship vanished into the freezing water, and the tale appeared to be over. Then, almost 3 decades later, somebody stumbled onto a deeply unsettling find. A Valencia lifeboat was discovered, floating silently inside a nearby sea cave. The chilling twist was its flawless, pristine condition. The little boat sat there perfectly preserved, as if patiently waiting in the dark all those years for someone to finally notice. 15. Imagine a blue whale crash landing onto your cruise and refusing to leave. During an Alaskan excursion, a massive whale launched itself out of the sea. Forget a graceful splash because this giant belly flopped right onto the low stern platform of the ship. Now there was a confused multi-ton whale flopping around where tourists normally posed for photos. Passengers found themselves trapped inside, blocked by their enormous uninvited guest. Nobody could simply shove it back overboard either. A commercial crane eventually rolled in to hoist the whale away like the heaviest prize in the world's worst claw machine. 16. Revenge tasted like mushroom soup when a furious chef drugged the entire steering crew. Back in the 20s, a disgruntled ship cook decided the navigators had wronged him. Instead of complaining like a normal person, he reached for chemistry. He quietly laced their soup with hallucinogenic mushrooms and served it with a friendly grin. Soon, the whole steering crew was tripping wildly while trying to pilot a giant ship. The hallucinating navigators promptly steered the vessel straight into a Florida sandbar. Nobody spotted the danger because nobody knew what was real. One spiteful lunch transformed seasoned sailors into a floating fever dream. 17. Booking luxury and getting a slanted funhouse instead is a rough deal. A high-end liner proudly installed shiny new stabilizing fins meant to keep everything smooth and level. Those fins had exactly one job to do. Naturally, they glitched and locked in completely opposite directions, which is the worst-case scenario. The ship froze at a steep 15-degree lean and stubbornly refused to straighten. For an entire week, passengers staggered around like the floor was actively betraying them. Drinks slid off tables, and sleeping became a sport. They paid top dollar for elegance and received a tilted carnival ride. 18. Who knew a dessert station could black out an entire megaship? A fancy chocolate fountain bubbled away on board, looking sweet and completely harmless. What nobody realized was that it had quietly sprung a leak. The melted chocolate slowly oozed through the floorboards on a secret downward mission. Its unfortunate destination was the main electrical junction room sitting right below. The sticky sludge hit the wiring and triggered a catastrophic short circuit. Suddenly, the whole ship plunged into darkness courtesy of dessert. Engineers had to admit the blackout came not from a storm, but from rogue weaponized chocolate. 19. Falling asleep and then falling overboard sounds like a death sentence, yet one man survived in a cooler. Off the coast of Florida, a passenger toppled off the ship while completely unconscious. He hit the dark open ocean with absolutely no land in sight. Pure dumb luck sent an empty industrial-sized plastic cooler tumbling overboard with him. He scrambled inside his floating picnic accessory and just went with it. For an exhausting 22 hours, he drifted in the sea inside that cooler. Rescuers eventually found the human leftovers, staying remarkably fresh in the world's largest accidental takeout container. 20. Give two ships an entire ocean, and they will still find a way to collide. Visualize a wide-open Mexican harbor packed with empty space and zero obstacles whatsoever. Now picture two sister cruise ships from the very same company attempting to dock there. Somehow, with all that room, these corporate siblings managed to smack straight into one another. It was less a maritime tragedy and more an embarrassing family reunion gone sideways. The company essentially crashed into itself in front of a full audience. Hand these two ships an empty sea and they would still high-five with their hulls. 21. Bass so heavy it executed a glass ceiling during a fancy dinner. The gala was in full swing with passengers dressed to the nines under a beautiful new electronic glass roof. Then, the live band cranked up their subwoofer for the big finale. Nobody knew that the bass was hitting the exact resonant frequency of the glass overhead. The whole ceiling suddenly shattered, raining shards down on the formal crowd mid-bite. Turns out the right note at the right pitch is basically a sonic sledgehammer. The band wanted applause. Instead, they accidentally demolished the roof and gave everyone a very memorable dinner. 22. For the perfect vacation photo, a captain destroyed a coral reef. Passengers wanted dramatic shots of a gorgeous Hawaiian beach right outside their windows. So the captain decided to be a hero and inch the giant ship closer to shore. He kept creeping forward, chasing that ideal Instagram angle. Then, the multi-million-dollar vessel ground to a halt on a protected coral reef. The likes were not worth it. He grounded an entire luxury liner so tourists could avoid using zoom on their cameras. Somewhere, a marine biologist is still crying about the reef that died for better lighting. 23. Whirling wind plucked a hot tub off the deck like a claw machine. The day seemed normal, until a freak localized waterspout spun up right near the ship. This swirling column of air had very specific taste in souvenirs. It zeroed in on the outdoor plastic hot tub and lifted it cleanly off the deck. Passengers watched their bubbling relaxation station get yanked into the sky. The spout then casually dropped the hot tub straight into the open ocean. One minute it was a spa and the next it was fish furniture. Nature stole the one amenity nobody bolted down. 24. Bad shrimp summoned a Coast Guard helicopter into a storm. Somewhere on board the kitchen served seafood that had clearly gone rogue. Almost the entire ship's roster got violently sick at the same time, which is a logistical nightmare. With hundreds of people incapacitated, the situation got serious fast. The U.S. Coast Guard actually had to scramble a helicopter and fly 500 doses of anti-nausea medicine through bad weather. Brave pilots risked a storm to deliver tummy relief. The mission was heroic, the cause was humiliating. An entire rescue operation launched because some shrimp decided to fight back. 25. Ding ding ding, went the haunted bell nobody was touching. After a historic liner got converted into a floating casino, strange things started happening at night. The ship's old bronze bell began ringing entirely by itself during dead calm evenings. There was no wind, no swell, and no person anywhere near it. Yet the eerie chimes kept echoing across the quiet decks. Gamblers downstairs were busy losing money, while something upstairs played phantom bell ringer. Maybe the old ship missed its sailing days. Maybe it just wanted in on the casino action. Either way, nobody volunteered to investigate the noise. 26. Bugs blinded an entire ship and forced it to freeze in traffic. Cruising along the southern coast, the crew suddenly faced a biblical surprise. A gigantic swarm of migrating locusts descended and completely plastered the bridge windows. The pilots instantly lost all visibility behind a writhing curtain of insects. Imagine trying to steer a massive ship while staring at a wall of bugs. With no way to see, they had no choice but to drop anchor right there. Unfortunately, right there happened to be a busy shipping lane. They sat blind and exposed, praying nothing big came barreling through the dark. 27. An art thief tried to mail a painting overboard using the ocean as a getaway car. Inside the ship's gallery hung a painting worth over $1 million. Rather than smuggling it out the normal way, this criminal mastermind got creative. He tied the artwork to a floating GPS tracking buoy and chucked the whole thing overboard. The plan was to let the painting bob in the sea and recover it later using the tracker. It was bold, inventive, and incredibly dumb. Saltwater and priceless canvas are not friends. He basically committed grand theft while also personally destroying his own loot. 28. Cheap steel made a Great Lakes ship pop open like a soda can. When this vessel was built, somebody cut corners on the metal. The steel hull contained way too much sulfur, which made it dangerously brittle. For a while, everything looked fine and sturdy enough. Then the ship hit nothing more dramatic than a minor patch of slushy ice. That should have been a gentle bump. Instead, the brittle hull cracked wide open like someone yanked a tab. The lakes did not need a monster storm to sink this one. A little slush and bad chemistry finished the job all by themselves. 29. One scheduling glitch trapped headbangers and grandma knitters on the same boat. A cruise line computer made a booking error of legendary proportions. It somehow scheduled a loud heavy metal music festival and a peaceful senior citizens knitting retreat on the exact same voyage. Picture mosh pits next to rocking chairs. Imagine screaming guitar solos drowning out the gentle click of knitting needles. The two groups could not have been more opposite if the computer tried. For one chaotic trip, leather jackets and cozy cardigans were forced to coexist. Honestly, somebody should have filmed it, because that is a documentary waiting to happen. 30. Hiding inside an oven saved a man from going down with the ship. During a sinking in the 19th century, a quick-thinking cook made a bizarre survival choice. As the vessel began flooding, he climbed straight into a large industrial baking oven. It sounds like the worst hiding spot imaginable, but the sealed oven trapped a precious pocket of air inside as the ship went under. While everything around him submerged, he sat in his metal bubble breathing easy. The cook who spent his life using that oven was now being saved by it. Sometimes the kitchen is the safest room on board. 31. Sailing along smoothly until a buried wartime relic decided to surface and ruin everything. A cruise ship's hull was minding its own business when it collided with a sunken World War II target submarine. This old sub had broken free from its moorings and gone drifting around completely undetected just below the surface. Nobody on the bridge had any clue a ghost from the 40s was lurking right beneath them. Then came the bump that should not have been possible. A leftover war machine ambushed a vacation cruise decades after its battles ended. Some enemies apparently never get the memo that the fighting is over. 32. Doing the laundry should not flood 400 rooms with foam, yet here we are. An automated laundry system on board suffered a serious meltdown and started blasting pressurized steam everywhere. This was not a polite little puff of mist either. The steam billowed out so aggressively that it tricked the ship's fire suppression system into thinking the place was burning. So the system did its duty and dumped foam across 400 passenger rooms. Travelers returned to find their cabins drowning in suds because of a washing machine tantrum. Nobody expects their vacation to end in a giant accidental bubble bath. 33. Drawing a map from memory and then trusting your own life to it takes a special kind of confidence. In the 19th century, a coastal captain navigated his ship using a chart he had sketched entirely from his own recollection. No official maps and no second opinions, just pure vibes and a good memory. He guided the vessel through dangerous waters relying on lines he scribbled himself. Then a massive rocky island appeared dead ahead. The ship cleared it by less than 10 feet, which is terrifyingly close. His brain barely saved everyone from his own ridiculous decision to wing it. 34. Watching plastic deck chairs melt into puddles is not on anyone's vacation itinerary. A sudden, bizarre weather event called a heat burst slammed into a cruise ship out of nowhere. In a matter of seconds, the temperature on deck rocketed up to a scorching 120 degrees. This was not a slow, warm afternoon, but an instant blast of furnace-level heat. The outdoor plastic deck chairs simply could not handle it and started melting into gooey messes. Passengers watched their lounging furniture dissolve before their eyes. The sky basically aimed a giant hairdryer at the deck and cranked it to maximum. 35. 10 days of drinking water that tasted aggressively of onions is a unique form of torture. On a liner back in the 80s, the water recycling system developed a peculiar malfunction. Somehow, every drop of drinking water on board took on a strong, overpowering onion flavor. Coffee tasted like onions. Ice tasted like onions. Brushing your teeth became an oddly savory experience. There was no escaping it for the entire 10-day trip. Passengers were essentially sipping liquid soup whether they wanted to or not. Nothing pairs with a romantic ocean sunset quite like a refreshing glass of onion water. 36. Breakfast still warming on the stove while every single crew member had vanished into thin air. In 1921, the Carol A. Deering was discovered fully stranded along the coast in a genuinely spooky state. Everything looked frozen mid-moment as if the crew had simply stepped away. Food sat warming on the stove ready to be eaten. Yet not a single sailor remained anywhere on board. The entire crew had completely disappeared without leaving a trace or a single clue behind. To this day, nobody knows what happened to them. A whole ship full of people just ghosted reality and never came back. 37. Jellyfish managed to do what no storm could and shut down a megaship completely. A massive school of jellyfish drifted right into the path of a giant cruise vessel. These squishy little blobs got sucked straight into the engine cooling intake valves. Once inside, they clogged the whole system like nature's gooeyest plumbing disaster. With its cooling intakes jammed, the ship lost all propulsion in the middle of the Atlantic. A multi-ton machine was brought to a standstill by an army of brainless jelly. Sometimes the deadliest opponent at sea is not a wave, but a blob with no plan. 38. Smuggling a monkey aboard a ship goes hilariously wrong when it chews through the radar. A passenger somehow snuck a live monkey on board, which is already a questionable life choice. Naturally, the monkey did not appreciate being a stowaway and made a break for freedom. It scrambled up into the ceiling panels and vanished into the guts of the ship. From there, it found the vessel's primary radar cables and treated them like a chew toy. Soon, the ship's radar went dead, thanks to one bored primate. the captain had to explain that his navigation failed because a monkey ate it. 39. Forgetting to account for a giant piano is a strange way to tilt an entire vessel. When designing the ship, somebody overlooked one heavy little detail. They never properly calculated the weight of the massive grand piano sitting in the ballroom. That oversight quietly threw off the whole balance of the vessel. Once everything was loaded, the ship started leaning noticeably to the port side. All because of one fancy instrument nobody bothered to weigh. Passengers spent their trip slightly sideways, courtesy of a forgotten piano. The designer essentially got outsmarted by the very showpiece meant to impress the high-paying guests. 40. Promising a 2-week luxury feast and running out of food by day 3 is bold. A cruise line proudly sold passengers a fancy long voyage full of fine dining dreams. Then reality hit hard when the fresh food supply mysteriously vanished early. By day 3 of the 2-week trip, the kitchen had basically given up. Passengers found themselves staring down a menu of nothing but hot dogs and canned beans. So much for the gourmet experience they were promised. People paid premium prices to eat like broke college students in the middle of the ocean. Luxury cruising at its absolute finest indeed. 41. A wild sea lion casually became a lifeguard for a toddler who fell in the harbor. During a stop in Alaska, a small child tumbled overboard into the chilly harbor water. This is the kind of moment that makes every parent's heart stop instantly. Then something almost unbelievable happened down in the water. A wild sea lion swam over and kept the little one afloat until help could arrive. The animal had zero obligation to care, yet it stuck around like a furry guardian. Port rescue teams reached the toddler safe and sound. A sea lion just outswam every trained lifeguard on the payroll. 42. Mistaking an oil rig's floodlights for the moon is a creative way to scrape a ship. Late one night, a cruise liner was cruising past a floating oil rig out at sea. The watchman on duty glanced at the rig's brilliant floodlights glowing in the distance. For some baffling reason, he decided those bright lights were the moon rising over the horizon. So he ignored them entirely and let the ship drift closer and closer. Then, the hull scraped right against the very rig he mistook for outer space. Astronomy was clearly not his strong suit. The moon does not usually have safety railings. 43. A virtual reality ride made people seasick by arguing with the actual sea. A modern ship installed a fancy virtual reality simulator to thrill its passengers. The whole point was an immersive experience that tricked your senses beautifully. Unfortunately, the software desynced from the real movement of the waves outside, so riders felt the ship sway one direction, while the headset insisted they were going another. That sensory mismatch is basically a recipe for instant nausea. Soon, a wave of motion sickness swept through everyone who tried it. They boarded a ship to enjoy the ocean and got betrayed by a glitchy headset instead. 44. Reaching for a dropped pen should not throw an entire ship into full reverse. On the bridge, a busy officer accidentally dropped his pen on the floor. Like anyone, he leaned over to grab it because nobody likes a runaway pen. The problem was what his body bumped on the way down. He accidentally shoved the controls and slammed the massive ship into full reverse. Suddenly, the whole vessel lurched backward, catching everyone completely off guard. Passengers probably wondered why the ocean was suddenly moving the wrong way. One clumsy stretch for a writing utensil turned into an unplanned and very public driving lesson. 45. Sailing through volcanic ash basically choked the engines until they gasped for air. A ship cruised directly into a thick cloud of volcanic ash hanging over the water. This was not a harmless bit of haze drifting around innocently. The dense ash flooded the engines and smothered them from getting clean oxygen. Machines need to breathe just like people do, and these engines were suffocating fast. The vessel started choking and sputtering as its power faded. It turns out a volcano can reach out and strangle a ship from miles away. Nature found a way to give a giant steel beast an asthma attack. 46. Mold quietly took over the air conditioning and got an entire ship gutted. Deep inside the central air conditioning units, a sneaky mold outbreak began to flourish. The whole point of those units was pumping fresh, cool air everywhere on board. Instead, they started blowing spores throughout the ship like a tiny biological invasion. Soon, the contamination got so bad that the situation turned genuinely dangerous. The entire cruise ship had to be evacuated and handed over to hazmat crews. Workers in protective suits came aboard and completely gutted the vessel. A patch of mold accomplished what storms and waves never could. 47. A ship's cat-jumping ship right before the final voyage is the ultimate bad omen. Legend tells of a beloved ship's cat that lived aboard a doomed liner. Right before the vessel set out on its last fateful trip, the cat made a decision. It abandoned the ship at port and refused to come back on board. The crew probably shrugged it off as a moody feline being dramatic. Then, the liner went out and met its tragic end at sea. Sailors swear the cat somehow knew the ship was doomed. When the animals start packing their bags, maybe everyone should pay attention. 48. A swordfish armed itself and stabbed a ship's sonar dome out of commission. Cruising along peacefully, the vessel suddenly got attacked by an unexpected ocean assassin. An aggressive swordfish came charging in and drove its pointed bill straight into the ship. Its target was the outer rubber coating of the underwater sonar dome. The fish punched right through it like a tiny waterborne knight on a mission. With the sonar damage, the ship lost its underwater navigation abilities. A single fish with a natural sword managed to blind a massive modern vessel. Somewhere, a swordfish is still bragging to its friends about that one. 49. Cutting a rival's generator wires right before a media launch is corporate sabotage at its pettiest. A competitor's brand new flagship vessel was about to make a glamorous debut. Cameras and reporters were ready to capture the shiny ship in all its glory. Then, a corporate spy crept aboard with one sneaky mission in mind. He carefully snipped the backup generator wires just before the big media event. The plan was to embarrass the rival when their pride and joy failed publicly. Business rivalry usually means stealing customers, not playing scissors in an engine room. This spy really chose chaos over a normal marketing campaign. 50. Soft rivets caused a steel liner to literally unzip itself during a storm. When this early steel liner was built, somebody used iron rivets that were far too soft. Those rivets were supposed to hold the entire hull together against the brutal sea. For a while, they managed to do their job well enough. Then a powerful storm rolled in and put real stress on the metal. Under the pressure, the weak rivets gave way one after another in a chain reaction. The hull plates peeled apart like someone yanking open a giant zipper. A handful of cheap rivets undressed an entire ship at the worst possible moment. 51. 50,000 gallons of pool water deciding to take the elevator down is a special kind of chaos. During a heavy ocean swell, the ship's main swimming pool suddenly cracked wide open. All that water had been happily contained for the whole trip until that moment. Once the crack appeared, there was nothing left to hold it back. 50,000 gallons of chlorinated water came crashing out and found the elevator shafts. The pool basically emptied itself straight down into the heart of the ship. Passengers waiting for an elevator got a surprise indoor waterfall instead. That is one way to ruin a relaxing swim. 52. A vintage tuxedo somehow doubled as a life vest and saved a man who could not swim. When the ship started going down, one passenger faced a terrifying problem. He could not swim a single stroke, which is bad news during a sinking. Luckily, he happened to be dressed for a formal occasion in a heavily padded vintage tuxedo. All that thick, old-fashioned padding trapped enough air to keep him buoyant. So while others struggled, this dapper gentleman just floated along comfortably. His fancy outfit accidentally became the most stylish flotation device in maritime history. Fashion finally proved it could actually save your life. 53. A dead whale wrapping around the propeller is a grim way to stall a ship. While sailing along, the liner ran into a massive whale carcass floating in the water. This was not a living creature, but a giant lifeless body drifting with the current. The ship plowed right into it before anyone could react. Then the carcass got tangled up around the propeller in the worst way possible. With the prop wrapped in whale, the engine ground to a complete halt. Suddenly, the whole vessel was stuck thanks to an unfortunate dead giant. Cleaning that mess off was nobody's idea of a fun afternoon. 54. A hacker turning the cabin lights into a 48-hour rave is the pettiest revenge imaginable. Someone managed to break into a cruise ship's smart lighting system from afar. Instead of doing something dramatic, this digital troublemaker got delightfully annoying. He started flashing every cabin light on and off without any mercy. For a full 48 hours straight, the lights blinked relentlessly across the ship. Passengers could not sleep, eat, or relax in the strobe light nightmare. There was no off switch they could find anywhere. A bored hacker basically threw the world's most unwanted disco party for 2 entire days. 55. Watching a movie at the wheel sent a helmsman drifting 20 miles into the wrong ocean. The crewman was supposed to be steering the ship with full attention. Instead, he pulled out his personal tablet to enjoy a movie on the job. As the plot unfolded, his eyelids got heavier and heavier. Eventually, he dozed right off at the wheel while the film kept playing. With nobody actually steering, the ship wandered 20 miles off its planned course. He woke up to discover the vessel had gone sightseeing without permission. Streaming services really should add a warning for people operating giant ships. 56. Stacked shipping containers becoming flying projectiles is a nightmare nobody booked tickets for. A freak microburst wind slammed down near a passenger ferry without any warning. This sudden violent gust had enough force to toss heavy objects around like toys. The shipping containers stored nearby never stood a chance against it. The wind knocked them over and sent them tumbling into the upper observation deck. That deck was meant for relaxing views, not getting crushed by cargo. Passengers learned that even sturdy steel boxes can become deadly when nature throws a tantrum. One quick burst of wind turned scenery into wreckage. 57. Contaminated ice cubes grounding an entire ship in Panama is a chilling betrayal. Everyone trusts the innocent little ice cube floating in their drink. Unfortunately, on this vessel, a batch of ice cubes turned out to be contaminated. As passengers happily cooled their beverages, they were also sipping trouble. Soon, a nasty outbreak of dysentery swept through the ship like wildfire. With so many people sick, the vessel had no choice but to get grounded in Panama. All that misery came from frozen water nobody suspected. The most dangerous thing on board was hiding quietly inside everybody's refreshing cold drink. 58. A grand piano floating ashore, bone dry inside its box, defies all logic. Back in 1890, a luxury liner met its end and sank beneath the waves. The ocean swallowed the ship along with its fancy belongings. Yet somehow, one item refused to play by the rules of physics. The vessel's grand piano drifted all the way to a beach still packed in its shipping crate. When people opened that box, they found the piano completely dry inside. Saltwater and sinking ships usually destroy everything they touch. This piano apparently negotiated a special deal with the sea and floated home in perfect comfort. 59. A shark, wedging itself in the water pipe, cut off every shower on board. Deep in the ship's plumbing, a large shark managed to find its way inside the water intake pipe. Once in there, the unfortunate creature got completely stuck. This was terrible news for the pipe, and even worse for the passengers. With a shark jammed in the system, the water pressure dropped to nothing. Suddenly, every shower across the ship stopped working properly. Travelers stood confused under dribbling faucets, unaware of the toothy clog upstream. A shark technically held an entire cruise hostage by ruining everyone's morning rinse. 60. Staging a fake pirate attack for a refund is the most committed scam ever attempted. A group of passengers wanted their money back from the cruise badly enough to get theatrical. Rather than just complaining at the front desk, they hatched an elaborate plan. They grabbed prop guns and tried to fake an entire pirate attack on board. The idea was that a terrifying raid would surely earn them a full refund. Unfortunately, faking a crime to scam a company tends to backfire spectacularly. Instead of a payout, they earned themselves a heap of very real trouble. Some refunds are just not worth the effort. 61. Building a funnel. 5 feet too tall is a great way to headbutt a bridge on day one. When this ship was constructed, somebody got a little overconfident with the measurements. The funnel ended up standing 5 feet taller than it had any business being. Nobody seemed to catch the mistake before the big maiden voyage. Then the ship proudly sailed under a famous historical bridge for the very first time. The oversized funnel smashed straight into the underside of that bridge. What was meant to be a glorious debut turned into an instant facepalm. The ship basically bonked its head leaving the driveway. 62. Fancy golden plating peeling off and jamming the fire doors is luxury working against itself. The ship's grand staircase was coated in gleaming gold plating to impress wealthy guests. It looked stunning right up until the moment it decided to misbehave. During a routine fire drill, the golden plating started peeling away from the steps. Bits of that decorative gold drifted into the worst possible spot. They wedged themselves into the automatic fire doors and jammed them wide open. The very safety doors meant to protect everyone were defeated by decoration. On this ship, the bling literally sabotaged the emergency equipment. 63. Getting swept off the ship and then dumped right back on by the next wave is wild luck. During rough seas, a giant wave grabbed one unlucky passenger and yanked him overboard. In that instant, he was gone, tossed into the churning ocean with no warning. His odds of survival looked grim as the water swallowed him up. Then the sea did something almost comically generous. The very next wave scooped him up and slammed him right back onto a lower deck. He went overboard and returned home all within a few terrifying seconds. The ocean took him, then immediately changed its mind. 64. Mistaking a fishing boat for a flock of birds is a costly identification error. Late in the day, a cruise ship was cruising through open water with its radar running. The radar operator spotted a small blip appear on the screen ahead. For some reason, he decided that little blip must be a flock of low-flying birds, so he dismissed it entirely and let the ship keep barreling forward. Unfortunately, that blip was actually a small, unlit wooden fishing boat. The cruise ship ran right over it before anyone realized the mistake. Birds and boats apparently look identical when you are not paying attention. 65. Dropping both anchors at full speed is the maritime version of slamming the brakes on a highway. The ship was racing along at its top speed of 22 knots like everything was fine. Then the automated anchor deployment system suffered a serious glitch. Without any warning, it released both massive anchors straight into the water. Dropping anchors while flying along is an extremely bad idea for obvious reasons. The sudden drag at high speed put enormous strain on the entire vessel. Passengers surely felt the violent jolt as the ship fought itself. A computer hiccup basically yanked the emergency brake on a moving cruise liner. 66. Forgetting the tide charts and beaching a cruise liner on a mudflat is a 12-hour timeout. The captain apparently skipped one very important step in his planning routine. He never bothered to check the local tide charts before sailing through. So when the tide quietly went out, it took the water right out from under him. His enormous cruise liner ended up completely high and dry on a muddy flat. There, it sat stuck in the muck for 12 embarrassing hours. All they could do was wait for the tide to come back and rescue them. The ocean basically left without saying goodbye. 67. Fog so thick you cannot see your own bow is a nightmare for any captain. One day, a dense fog bank rolled in and completely swallowed the ship. This was not your average misty morning haze drifting gently along. The fog was so impossibly thick, it erased everything from view in seconds. From the bridge windows, the captain could not even spot the front bow of his own vessel. Keep in mind, this ship stretched a full 900 feet long. He was essentially driving a massive blindfolded giant through the water. Steering a ship you cannot see the front of is pure white-knuckle terror. 68. A flea invasion from infested luggage forced an entire ship to gas itself with sulfur. Some passengers boarded an early 1900s liner carrying more than just their suitcases. Their luggage was secretly infested with a thriving population of fleas. Once on board, those fleas spread throughout the ship with reckless enthusiasm. The infestation got so out of control that drastic measures became necessary. Crews had to completely seal up the entire vessel from top to bottom. Then they fumigated the whole thing with sulfur gas to wipe out the pests. A few hitchhiking fleas turned a passenger liner into a giant bug bomb. 69. Finding vintage cars looking brand new at the bottom of the Great Lakes is delightfully eerie. Long ago, a ship carrying a cargo of vintage automobiles sank in the Great Lakes. Everyone assumed those cars were lost forever to the cold, dark depths. Then, decades later, explorers finally located the wreck resting on the lake bed. What they discovered down there genuinely surprised them. The vintage automobiles still looked perfectly brand new after all those years underwater. The frigid fresh water had preserved them almost flawlessly. It was like stumbling onto a time capsule of cars, patiently waiting for someone to come start the engines. 70. A protective mama bear scaling an anchor chain to grab her cub is peak parenting. A cruise ship sat docked in Alaska when a curious bear cub got a little too adventurous. The little troublemaker somehow ended up near the big vessel. Naturally, its mother was not about to leave her baby behind. So the protective mama bear swam right out to the docked ship. Then she climbed straight up the massive anchor chain to reach her wayward cub. Crew members surely watched in stunned amazement at this furry rescue mission. That bear scaled a metal chain like a determined parent, retrieving a kid from a tall slide. 71. Pouring diamond dust into the engine oil is the fanciest act of sabotage ever committed. A saboteur wanted to destroy a cruise liner's propulsion system from the inside out. Instead of something crude, he chose a luxuriously expensive weapon. He slipped fine diamond dust straight into the engine oil lines. Diamonds may be a girl's best friend, but they are an engine's worst enemy. That gritty dust ground away at the machinery until the entire propulsion system was ruined. The most glamorous mineral on Earth quietly shredded a multi-ton engine. Somewhere, a villain laughed knowing he wrecked a ship using literal sparkle. 72. Building a ship from battleship scraps left it sitting 4 feet too low in the water. When this vessel was constructed, the builders reused leftover steel from a scrapped military battleship. Recycling sounds responsible until you remember battleship steel is incredibly heavy. All that dense metal made the new ship far heftier than the design ever intended. As a result, it sat a full 4 feet lower in the water than planned. The ship basically showed up to sea already overweight before a single passenger boarded. Reusing war metal seemed clever right up until the waterline started creeping uncomfortably high. Some shortcuts really do sink in. 73. Confusing gallons with liters left a mega ship floating around on empty. During a routine refueling, the ship's computer system made a math blunder for the ages. It calculated the fuel order in gallons instead of liters, or the other way around. That little mix-up meant way less fuel actually made it into the tanks. Everyone assumed they were fully loaded and ready for the long journey ahead. Then the mega cruise ship simply ran out of gas in the middle of the ocean. A unit conversion error left a giant vessel drifting helplessly. Even rocket scientists have lost things to the gallon-liter trap. 74. Cuddling a hot boiler pipe to survive a freezing shipwreck is grim genius. When a winter shipwreck struck, one man faced the deadly threat of the cold. The icy water and frigid air could kill a person fast in those conditions. Then he spotted his unlikely savior in the wreckage. A boiler pipe nearby still held onto its warmth even after the fire died. So he wrapped himself around that pipe and held on for dear life. It radiated just enough heat for hours to keep him alive through the worst of it. He basically survived by snuggling the one warm thing left aboard a sinking ship. 75. Hitting a container full of rubber ducks and releasing them across the Atlantic is oddly poetic. While sailing along, the ship struck a floating object bobbing in the water. It turned out to be a waterlogged shipping container that had been lost at sea. When the collision cracked, it opened. Thousands of rubber ducks came pouring out. Suddenly, an army of cheerful yellow bath toys spread across the Atlantic Ocean. The serious cruise ship had accidentally launched a fleet of tiny smiling ducks. Sailors probably stared in disbelief as the bright little flotilla drifted away. That collision turned a vast ocean into the world's largest bathtub. 76. Mistaking a cloud reflection for an island sent a smart ship into a panic spin. A modern vessel proudly relied on its fancy computerized navigation system. The whole idea was that smart technology would keep everyone perfectly safe. Then, the system spotted a large cloud reflection on the water ahead. For some reason, the computer became convinced it was looking at a solid island. So it slammed the ship into an emergency 90-degree turn to avoid the imaginary land. Passengers got thrown around for absolutely no reason at all. The high-tech brain of the ship basically got spooked by its own shadow. 77. Typing the wrong coordinates and aiming for Antarctica instead of Aruba is a tropical disaster. The first mate had one simple job involving the GPS autopilot. He needed to punch in the correct coordinates for the ship's sunny destination. Unfortunately, his fingers slipped and he entered the wrong numbers entirely. Instead of steering toward the warm beaches of Aruba, the ship aimed for Antarctica. One was a tropical paradise, and the other was a frozen wasteland. Passengers expecting palm trees were unknowingly being driven toward penguins and ice. A single typo nearly swapped a beach vacation for an Antarctic expedition nobody signed up for. 78. A rogue wave yeeting the mini golf course into the ocean is a strange sight to witness. The ship featured a fun little outdoor miniature golf course for its passengers. Everything was pleasant until a rogue wave struck the vessel from behind. This sneaky wave came out of nowhere with surprising force. It slammed into the ship and launched the mini golf course elements right off the deck. The tiny windmills and obstacles went flying straight into the open ocean. Passengers watched their putting green disappear into the waves in an instant. The sea apparently decided it wanted to play a round of golf instead. 79. The entire kitchen staff poisoning themselves at midnight left 3,000 people hungry. On board, the cooks worked hard, feeding thousands of passengers every single day. One night, the kitchen crew decided to enjoy a little midnight snack of their own. Unfortunately, whatever they ate turned out to be a serious mistake. The whole staff came down with food poisoning at the exact same time. Suddenly, there was nobody left standing to cook breakfast for 3,000 hungry guests. The very people who fed everyone had accidentally taken themselves out. The crews woke up to a kitchen full of 6 chefs and 0 pancakes. 80. A ship vanishing completely and staying lost forever is the ocean keeping its best secret. In 1909, the SS Waratah set out across the sea like any other voyage. Then it simply disappeared without a single trace left behind. There was no wreckage, no debris, and no survivors to tell the tale. An entire ship full of people just evaporated from the face of the earth. To this very day, nobody has ever found where it went down. The exact location remains one of the greatest unsolved ocean mysteries in history. The Waratah sailed straight into legend and never bothered checking back in. 81. Picture booking a relaxing swim and finding the pool deck occupied by a gang of barking squatters. The cruise ship dropped anchor and lowered its low-lying swim platform for guests. Before anyone could enjoy a dip, a rowdy colony of sea lions had other plans. They hauled themselves up onto the platform and claimed it as their own. These blubbery freeloaders spread out and refused to budge for anybody. Passengers eager to swim found their access completely blocked by honking tenants. There was no negotiating with a crowd that size. The sea lions basically declared the swim deck their personal kingdom and won. 82. Few criminals managed to arrest themselves, but this fugitive pulled it off inside a magic trunk. An international fugitive needed a clever way to dodge the law aboard the ship. So he disguised himself as the ship's magician, hoping to blend right in. The plan was working fine until a storm rolled in and shook everything up. During the chaos, he accidentally locked himself inside one of his own prop trunks. The escape artist could not escape his own equipment, which is deeply ironic. Instead of vanishing from the authorities, he vanished into a box. His grand magic act ended with him helplessly stuck backstage. 83. Only a left turn could expose this ship's embarrassing secret, and expose it the ocean did. Somebody filled the ballast tanks unevenly when preparing the vessel for its journey. Those tanks are supposed to keep a ship balanced and steady in the water. With the water distributed wrong, the balance got thrown completely off. The strange result only showed up whenever the ship made a left turn. During every left turn, the whole vessel suddenly looked dramatically crooked and lopsided. Passengers probably thought they were losing their minds each time. The ship was perfectly fine going right, but turned into a tilted mess going left. 84. Advertising an underwater viewing room that is secretly a cabin with a fish tank camera is peak scam. A high-end cruise proudly promoted a fancy underwater viewing room to lure in guests. People imagined gazing out at the wonders of the deep ocean in real time. The reality turned out to be far less magical than the brochure suggested. The so-called viewing room was just a standard cabin with a live camera feed. Even worse, that feed was simply pointed at an ordinary fish tank. Passengers paid extra to watch goldfish on a screen indoors. That is less underwater adventure and more aquarium screensaver. 85. A puffer jacket saving someone from a 100-foot balcony fall is the unlikeliest hero. A woman somehow tumbled off her cruise balcony, plummeting toward the water below. A 100-foot fall onto the ocean should be devastating by any measure. Luckily, she happened to be wearing a big oversized puffer jacket at the time. As she fell, that jacket puffed up around her like a protective cushion. When she hit the water, the padded coat softened the brutal impact. Against all odds, she survived the terrifying plunge thanks to her outerwear. Fashion experts say warmth and now apparently surviving falls are both puffer jacket specialties. 86. Colliding with an abandoned ghost yacht that drifted empty for months is the stuff of sea legends. While sailing along the cruise liner crossed paths with a mysterious vessel. It was a drifting luxury yacht floating completely empty across the open water. This eerie boat had apparently been abandoned and adrift for months on end. Nobody was aboard to steer it or warn anyone of its presence. The cruise ship ended up colliding with the silent, ghostly yacht. Imagine the unsettling feeling of crashing into a vessel with no crew and no answers. That empty yacht wandered the ocean alone until it found something to hit. 87. A giant video screen crushing the juice bar during a storm is a dramatic way to ruin happy hour. The ship boasted a massive outdoor video screen for entertaining its passengers. During a fierce storm, the howling wind put serious pressure on the structure. Eventually, the enormous screen tore right off its mounts high up on the deck. Gravity took over and sent the heavy screen crashing downward. It landed squarely on the ship's upper deck juice bar below. The refreshing little drink station got completely flattened in an instant. Passengers craving a smoothie watched their juice bar get demolished by falling electronics. 88. Navigating a narrow channel with a phone app, boarding after the radar cracked, takes serious nerve. The ship needed to pass through a tight, tricky channel that demanded precision. Unfortunately, the primary radar screen chose that exact moment to crack and fail. Most captains would call for backup, but this one improvised boldly. He pulled out a regular consumer smartphone app to guide the giant ship through. That tiny screen meant for finding coffee shops was now steering a massive vessel. Somehow he threaded the narrow channel using technology meant for casual road trips. It worked out, but the whole crew probably aged a decade watching him do it. 89. Lightning frying every slot machine in the casino at once is the universe-canceling gambling night. During a storm, a powerful lightning bolt struck the ship's main mast directly. All that electrical energy had to go somewhere fast, and it did. The surge raced through the vessel and zeroed in on the onboard casino. In a single instant, every electronic slot machine got completely fried. Rows of blinking gambling machines went dark all at the exact same moment. Players mid-spin suddenly found themselves staring at dead screens. The sky basically reached down and pulled the plug on the entire casino floor at once. 90. Toxic fumes from a hair salon evacuating 3 whole decks is a beauty treatment gone rogue. On board, the ship featured a hair salon to keep passengers looking sharp. One day, a toxic chemical leak sprang from somewhere inside that salon. Those strong beauty chemicals turned out to be far more dangerous than expected. The hazardous fumes began spreading rapidly through the surrounding area. Soon the situation grew serious enough to force a major evacuation. 3 entire decks had to be cleared out because of the dangerous vapors. A routine haircut somehow escalated into a full-blown chemical hazard, sending hundreds fleeing. 91. The odds of a ship sinking on the exact anniversary of its sister are almost too creepy to believe. A passenger ship met its tragic end going down beneath the waves. The strange part was the timing of when this disaster actually happened. It sank on the exact same day and the exact same hour as its sister ship. That sister vessel had gone down precisely 10 years earlier in its own wreck. 2 related ships chose the identical calendar moment a decade apart to perish. The universe apparently kept a very morbid appointment book. Some coincidences feel less like chance and more like the ocean holding a grudge. 92. Few things ruin a captain's concentration faster than a bald eagle flying through the window. A cruise ship was navigating along when a large bald eagle made a dramatic entrance. The majestic bird soared straight through the open window of the bridge. Suddenly, there was a giant eagle flapping around inside the control room. The startled pilot lost his focus completely as feathers and chaos filled the air. While he was distracted, the ship nearly collided with a nearby buoy. Patriotism took on a whole new meaning that day. America's national bird almost caused a maritime fender bender by crashing the steering party. 93. Stealing the copper out of a backup steering system is sabotage that pays in scrap metal. While a cruise ship sat docked, a thief crept aboard with a greedy plan. He went straight for the copper wiring inside the backup steering system. Copper fetches good money, so he stripped it all out for profit. The trouble was that this wiring served an important safety purpose. With the backup steering gutted, the system was quietly compromised. Then on the very next voyage, that steering failed when it was needed. One man's scrap metal payday turned into a dangerous emergency for everyone aboard the ship. 94. A bow built too flat turns gentle waves into a violent mechanical bull ride. When this ship was designed, someone made the front bow slightly too flat. A proper bow is supposed to slice through the water smoothly and gracefully. This flat one had no interest in being graceful whatsoever. The moment the seas got rough, the ship began bouncing wildly up and down. Passengers felt every jolt as the vessel bucked like a rodeo machine. Holding onto anything became a full-time job during the choppy stretches. A small design flaw turned an ocean cruise into the world's largest and wettest amusement ride. 95. Swapping sugar for industrial salt at the captain's fancy dinner is a recipe for instant betrayal. The cruise line planned an elegant formal captain's dinner with delicious desserts. Somewhere along the way, a catastrophic kitchen mix-up occurred. Instead of sugar, the cooks accidentally used industrial salt in every single dessert. Guests, dressed in their finest, dug into the beautiful-looking treats with high hopes. Then their faces twisted as the salty horror hit their taste buds. Every cake and pastry tasted like a mouthful of the sea. The fanciest dinner of the voyage turned into a synchronized spit take across the dining room. 96. Surviving a shipwreck by floating on a butcher's block is a chef's finest improvisation. When the vessel began sinking, a quick-thinking cook searched for anything to save him. The lifeboats were gone, but his kitchen offered an unlikely solution. He grabbed a giant thick wooden butcher's block from his workspace. That heavy chunk of solid wood happened to float surprisingly well, so he climbed aboard his makeshift raft and rode out the disaster. The very surface where he chopped vegetables became his ticket to survival. Out of everyone on board, the chef proved that knowing your kitchen can literally keep you alive. 97. Getting blinded by a sunset is a poetic but expensive way to bump into a pier. A cruise liner was coming in to dock using a high-tech docking laser system. This clever system was supposed to guide the ship safely alongside the pier. Unfortunately, the timing lined up with a brilliant glowing sunset. The bright glare overwhelmed the docking laser and rendered it useless. With its guidance blinded, the ship misjudged the approach entirely. Then it bumped right into the solid concrete pier with an unfortunate thud. The most beautiful sunset of the trip ended up sabotaging the parking job. Even technology gets dazzled sometimes. 98. A green energy sail refusing to fold down basically turned a cruise ship into a giant kite. A modern vessel proudly featured a computerized green energy sail system. The eco-friendly sail was meant to harness wind and save fuel. The problem started when a storm rolled in and the sail malfunctioned. It stubbornly refused to fold down despite the dangerous weather. So the massive sail just stood there, catching the full force of the storm winds. The ship began acting like an enormous kite threatening to flip right over. Going green is admirable, until your environmental gadget tries to launch the whole boat into the sky. 99. A single floating log turned an entire dining room into a shattered mess of plates and wine. The pilot was steering along when he spotted a floating log directly ahead. Wanting to avoid a collision, he cranked the ship into a hard, sharp turn. That aggressive maneuver successfully dodged the harmless-looking log. Unfortunately, it also flung everything inside the dining areas around violently. Hundreds of plates and wine bottles went sliding right off the tables. Glass shattered, and food flew everywhere in the sudden chaos. He saved the ship from a tiny log, but completely destroyed dinner for everyone aboard. 100. A waterspout raining live fish onto the buffet is the strangest seafood delivery imaginable. Out on the open water, a sudden waterspout spun up near the cruise ship. This swirling column of air reached down and grabbed thousands of small fish. It lifted the whole wriggling school straight up into the sky. Then the waterspout carried its slippery cargo over the vessel below. Suddenly, thousands of fish came raining down directly onto the outdoor buffet. Passengers grabbing lunch found themselves pelted with falling seafood from above. The kitchen never ordered that delivery, but the sky generously provided it anyway, whether anyone wanted it or not. 101. Tracing a mysterious rash on 80% of passengers back to eco-friendly detergent is an ironic twist. A strange skin rash began spreading across the cruise ship at an alarming rate. Soon, a staggering 80% of the passengers were itching and covered in irritation. Panic set in as everyone wondered what horrible illness was sweeping the vessel. Investigators searched high and low for the mysterious culprit behind the outbreak. The answer turned out to be hilariously mundane in the end. An eco-friendly laundry detergent used on the bed sheets was the real villain. The green clean choice gave nearly the whole ship an unwanted rash. 102. Discovering a ghost ship with breakfast set, but no people is the ocean at its eeriest. Searchers came upon a drifting vessel floating silently across the water. Everything aboard looked perfectly normal at first glance, which made it worse. The dining room table was completely set and ready for a pleasant breakfast. Plates and utensils sat waiting as if the meal was about to begin. Yet there was not a single human remains anywhere on the entire ship. The whole crew had simply vanished, leaving their breakfast plans frozen in time. That fully prepared table with nobody to eat at it is pure nightmare fuel. 103. A whale using a ship as a back-scratcher nearly gave passengers a collective heart attack. A massive migrating whale swam up alongside the cruise vessel one day. Apparently, the giant creature had an itch that needed some serious scratching. So it decided the ship's hull was the perfect tool for the job. The whale rubbed its enormous back against the metal hull with great enthusiasm. That created a vibration so intense, it rattled through the entire ship. Passengers inside felt the violent shaking and assumed they had struck a rock. In reality, they just witnessed the world's largest creature treating their crews like a scratching post. 104. Trying to sink a ship for insurance money while it sits safely at the dock takes real audacity. An insurance scammer hatched a plan to sink a passenger ship for a payout. Rather than wait for the open sea, he got impatient at the worst time. The ship was safely tied to a maintenance dock when he made his move. He secretly opened the bilge valves, hoping to flood the vessel quietly. The plan was for the ship to mysteriously sink and collect the insurance. Doing this right at the dock was about as subtle as a brick. His greedy scheme was destined to get caught red-handed. 105. Wearing spiked golf shoes on a glass floor is the fastest way to ruin a million-dollar view. The cruise ship proudly featured a beautiful glass-bottom floor for guests. Passengers could gaze straight down through it at the ocean depths below. The whole attraction lasted exactly one day before disaster struck. One oblivious passenger decided to stroll across it wearing spiked golf shoes. Those sharp metal spikes scratched and clouded the pristine glass instantly. By the end of day one, the gorgeous clear floor looked foggy and ruined. One careless choice of footwear destroyed an expensive feature before anyone really enjoyed it. 106. $500,000 of vintage liquor drowning in salt water is enough to make anyone weep. A luxury ship maintained a fancy champagne cellar stocked with the finest bottles. This collection held an impressive $500,000 worth of vintage liquor. Everything was perfectly preserved and waiting for wealthy guests to enjoy. Then disaster struck when salt water somehow flooded into the precious cellar. The invading seawater mixed with and ruined the elegant collection. $500,000 of vintage bubbly was destroyed in one soggy moment. Somewhere, a sommelier fainted upon hearing that the ocean drank better than the passengers did. 107. Surviving a shipwreck by floating on an upright base is a musician's ultimate encore. When the vessel went down, one musician faced the terrifying open water. The lifeboats were unavailable, but he had his trusty instrument nearby. His upright base happened to be made of hollow fiberglass, which changed everything. That hollow body trapped enough air to float remarkably well in the sea. So he clung to his giant instrument and rode out the long night. The bass kept him safely above the water until daylight finally arrived. Out of every survival story, his was the only one with its own built-in soundtrack. 108. Crashing into a wooden tall ship being filmed for a movie is a plot twist nobody scripted. A passenger liner was cruising through the water on an ordinary day. Up ahead, a historical wooden tall ship drifted across its path. This old-fashioned vessel was actually being used to film a period movie. Cameras were rolling to capture the romance of classic seafaring. Then the modern cruise liner collided right into the drifting movie prop. The film crew got a dramatic scene they absolutely never planned for. Their carefully staged period piece suddenly featured a very real and very modern maritime disaster. 109. A software update locking 2,000 people inside their cabins is technology holding everyone hostage. A smart ship decided to install an automated door system for convenience. The whole idea was that doors would respond intelligently to keep things smooth. Then, the system began a routine software update like any computer would. During that update, the automated doors completely locked down across the ship. 2,000 passengers suddenly found themselves trapped inside their own cabins. For 4 long hours, they were stuck waiting for the doors to wake up. The high-tech upgrade meant to help everyone instead turned the whole ship into a prison. 110. Getting fired for late-night karaoke over the ship's loudspeaker is a gloriously dumb way to lose a job. The captain was supposed to be a responsible leader commanding the vessel. Instead, he discovered the ship's PA loudspeaker system and could not resist temptation. Late at night, he started belting out loud off-key karaoke for everyone to hear. Passengers trying to sleep were treated to his terrible midnight concert against their will. Annoyed travelers pulled out their phones and filmed the whole embarrassing performance. That footage sealed his fate pretty quickly. He got fired mid-voyage, proving that some captains should never touch a microphone. 111. A mirage turning a distant cargo ship into a giant floating wall caused a panic worthy of a movie. A unique atmospheric thermal inversion created a strange optical illusion over the water. This mirage distorted the view in a genuinely convincing and alarming way. A faraway cargo ship suddenly appeared to be a massive floating wall blocking the path. The cruise pilot saw this looming obstacle and reacted with sheer panic. He cranked the ship into such a sharp turn that the whole vessel listed 10 degrees. Passengers and dishes went sliding from the dramatic maneuver. All that chaos came from dodging a wall that never actually existed. And that is 111 of the strangest cruise ship disasters in maritime history. From ghost ships drifting empty for decades, to whales crash landing onto decks, to entire crews vanishing into thin air, the ocean never runs out of bizarre ways to ruin a vacation. If even one of these stories made your jaw drop, then smash that like button and drop a comment telling me which disaster you absolutely refuse to believe was real. And if you are not subscribed to Dumb History yet, then what are you even doing? Hit subscribe and join the crew for more wild, ridiculous, and totally true stories from the dumbest corners of history. I will see you in the next one, and until then, stay curious and stay off those boats.